So the last time we spoke, I promised to show an autonomous QA agent, and I showed you a non-autonomous single run agent
How
instead.
dare you?
And it was kind of a bummer. So, but since then, I've done a lot of work to actually make it autonomous. And my definition is that it like runs on its own and makes its own decisions. Um, and in this case, what's happening is, oh, sorry. Okay, so that was like one thing. And the other thing that we wanted to be able to do is consistently do more than one thing at a time. So this is almost more of a Dagger like code issue, or my code of Dagger issue than like a limitation. But thanks to Kyle from who you guys met last week, we sorted that out. Um, I was trying to run matrix builds with multiple versions of Dagger, but that did not work for me for a couple of different reasons. And then setting up cron jobs did work. So I'm really happy because my definition of autonomous is that this thing runs every hour and it decides what to do on its own, which feels like less of a misleading title than it was before. So I present to you the actually autonomous QA agent. So what this thing does is uh, every hour it runs on a cron job and on Circle CI basically. There's like a scheduled job on Circle CI. It runs every hour. You can see that config here. It's very simple. Basically, I have this very simple job in Circle. I'm going to zoom in before Jeremy yells at me. We have a
Warning.
very simple job in Circle CI. It just calls my Dagger pipeline using the new shell syntax, and that's basically it. And then what that does is it kicks off the same kind of job that we saw last time, except this thing is much like more polished now. So this is my QA job itself, and it basically grabs a module or a list of modules, and then it um, for each of one of those modules, it calls this run function, which then does the QA, which we'll see in just a second. And then it brings me back to the entire directory that includes the report, the HTML report for that run function. And then I split out the index builder. One of the things I noticed was it was really struggling to actually like build the index HTML page, which in my opinion should have been the simplest thing that this thing um, could do, right? Is just like read a list of directories and give me a summary or give me a list of or give me a table of contents. But it struggled really, really hard. And I thought it was because maybe like the prompt was like just had too much information in it. There was like too much going on. It was getting confused. So I split it out into a separate function, which I'm happy that I did. But unfortunately, as a part of that, I built like the world's worst static site generator ever because it took 17 minutes to read 30 files and generate an index page that only included 9 of them. So it was a very, very sad day in autonomous QA history. And I'm still kind of stuck here. Like this is like the last missing piece for me is I can't figure out how to get the models to do this, what I believe to be like the simplest task. And I am able to get them to do the most hard thing, which is like install, test, analyze, and QA the modules. I've tried, I tried Anthropic, OpenAI, and Gemini, and they all kind of fail in their own little ways. I think I've had one successful full report built in less than 10 minutes, which I feel happy about. But I'm definitely still a little bit stumped and kind of going to continue to bang on this for a little bit. And then ultimately, once the index page does come back, then I push the changes to GitHub. Previously, I think I was publishing this to Surge, but for some reason it was down for me last week, so I just switched to using just GitHub Pages, and it works quite nicely. So I have basically a function called push, which mounts the directory that includes all the QA reports, and then using a GitHub token I'm publishing it to the GitHub repo, and that's kind of it. And this is just like a standard like Dagger 101 type of function that you might see in a regular pipeline. Um, I thought about making this part autonomous, or like at least like I thought about making this part like powered by the LLM, like tell it to call the push function, and maybe I will. But this consistently works every single time, so and I'm happy about that. Um, the other thing that I wanted to show off here is we're using this function now uses the new Environments API. So this is like the latest and greatest state of the art of how to use Dagger with LLMs and how to create what was formerly called workspaces, now is called environments. So essentially, what's happening here is I have a workspace that I created that includes those functions for actually doing the QA. We can investigate that for a second here. Basically, there's a constructor. It can read files, write files. It can install modules. It can build modules. It can crawl the module and get information out of that page. And it can also grab the Dagger version. This crawl function, by the way, is using one of Kyle's modules that he wrote. It's published in the Daggerverse called Firecrawl. Firecrawl is a service that I think also uses LLMs somewhere to like crawl the page and extract information, I believe. But if nothing else, what it does is it returns a very well-structured document that LLM can read really nicely. So Kyle has a module for Firecrawl out in the Daggerverse. You can use it with or without an LLM. But in this case, I added it to my workspace, so it's using that module as well. So I'm basically setting up that workspace, and I'm creating a new Dagger environment, passing in the workspace, passing in a string input, and then returning the entire workspace back, from which I extract the container and the directory. So this is the one-shot run. It does the report, does the QA, and returns the directory. And then separately, I have a new function also using environments, but in this case, using like a separate environment and also like a standalone environment. I'm not calling a different module. I'm just building one kind of from scratch here. And in this case, I have a basic environment. I give it a empty directory, essentially. I'm sorry, not an empty directory. I give it the directory of the QA reports that I have, and then I return an index file, essentially. So this is like a really nice, simple example of how to use the Environments API. All this code is open source, so if you're curious, you can check it out there. And the final result is still somewhat disappointing because here it is published to this website now, so lovelabs.io. I'll share the link somewhere. Nice. And it updates every hour. So every single hour this thing runs. You can see in Dagger Cloud, it's just kind of indefinitely runs forever on a scheduled job. And then it publishes this page. And basically every hour, I think 1 out of every like 50 hours, it'll do the right thing. And then all the other times it'll either make a partial page like this, or it'll just have the single module that it was testing, which is really, really sad. However, the entire repo is full of the reports. So all the data is there. All the reports are actually there. It's just not able to generate the correct index. And we can investigate some of these. So like, for example, let's look at the one that failed and the one that succeeded. 1 second. So this one succeeded. It was really happy. All this information here is actually coming from that Firecrawl API. This information here. So I was struggling to get like the version information, the author information. This is coming directly from their Firecrawl API. So it's a really, really nice, well-structured document that makes it really easy for the LLM to kind of do the right thing. And here's one that failed. It failed to install for some reason. I also asked it to generate memes, and it doesn't do a good job at that, but every once in a while it does. So this case, it successfully injected this meme into the
complete report. With entropy in there, of like
non. Yeah, it's usually relevant too. It's usually like a relevant meme, which is really nice. I really like that. Okay, so with that, here we are. This is my autonomous QA module. I'm really, really happy with the progress. I'm also really happy with the new Environments API. It's just a much simpler way to think about how all the pieces fit together. But as you can see, it's still a little bit of work in progress. I'm just surprised at how hard this like table of contents generation part seems to be. And if you have any ideas or if you run into this yourself, I'd love to hear more about that somewhere in our community.
Awesome. Super exciting. Now, Lev, are you thinking? Just question. Are you thinking like what's next? Are you thinking like you're gonna write a primer on like year 2000 HTML for your to feed into the model? Or are you thinking to do some of this stuff just kind of procedurally and not try and have the LLM generate it? What are you thinking next?
Yeah. I think I want to go read all these blog posts that people are sharing around how to write good prompts, because I think a big part of my problem is my prompt itself. Like this is the one for the index. I try to be very explicit. It's really funny because it comes back. It consistently comes back and says things like this, where, sorry, I can't find a good example, but basically it's along the lines of like, I asked it to do something, and it'll be like, okay, sure, no problem, I got you. And then, sorry, let me just pull up one example of that.
I would love to see that.
Oh my God. Okay, here we go. Oh no, sorry. I don't have one. I don't have a one handy at the moment, I think. But it's along the lines of this. It says, hey, I got you, I did this. In a production implementation, I would have done this, but here's this like partial report, right? So it knows that it's not completing its task, and it asks me, do you want me to complete the task? So in my prompt, I'm like, hey, like, I'm trying this new, like, this is fake, but I don't know, maybe it works. It's like a, oh, I misspelled important. Maybe that's the problem. It's like a fake CSS thing, right? But I'm like, hey, this is a production implementation. Make sure you actually read the file. Like, you're operating not interactively. Don't ask for confirmation. Like, make sure it actually works. Don't stop. I tried every kind of version of this, massaging it a little bit, and it's funny because like it recognizes that I'm trying really hard to get it to do its thing, and it's just like straight up like gaslighting me, right? It's like, yeah, you asked me to do a production implementation. I know I'm in production right now. This is what I would do in production. Do you want me to do that instead of just doing it? So I don't know. I'm really struggling here. So I'm wondering if there's just something maybe in the prompt that I could do to help it out a little bit, and maybe even try to use maybe some more intelligent models. I'm using the defaults that we have out of the box, which is like 3.5 Claude for Anthropic and Gemini 2.0 Flash. So maybe there's like other models that will be better for this kind of stuff. I don't know. But going back to your question, Jeremy, yeah, I think that there is a place where like again, the hard part of this, in my opinion, is like all of these reports. So maybe the simplest solution is to use like a static site generator and, create markdown files or something for that static site generator, and then create the right front matter so that I can create a very simple table of context or table, right? Instead of trying to generate it kind of from scratch using the LLM. The other thing I was thinking about is also maybe just making a small like SQLite database and inserting a record for each of these things along with the HTML report, and then again generating the index off of a single query rather than off of having to go to each file, read it, understand it, and then append it to a table. So that's what I'm going to experiment with a little bit before giving up. But I won't come back and show this until it actually does the thing consistently.
I can't wait.
Yeah. It is really cool to see though the progress, because I think people are hitting a lot of these same problems as they're also, becoming prompt engineers in a sense, and so we have some feedback even from the users in the chat around like, people are hitting the same problem and seeing that they're seeing a lot that it plans stuff and wants approval instead of just going with what needs to be done. One of our teammates said maybe you could try adding a system prompt, and then one of the other feedbacks was they found it helpful to structure it more like a markdown README instead of a wall of text. So
yeah,
we have some pointers already.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll definitely try all those suggestions. Thank you guys very much.
Yeah.
Is it possible to see one of the reports that generated by the tool? Yeah.
Yep. So this is an example of one. By the way, let me show the report prompt too, because this is very This is very, very like it's very explicit. Like generate HTML page, include all this information, and it does a really, really good job at doing that. Kind of. I still kind of glossed over the fact that these suggestions are still BS. It's the same for every single module. So a little bit of a work in progress as well that I'm still noodling on. But this is the general report. It is funny still that every report is slightly different themed, because it's kind of independently generated, and it decides for itself what theme to use that day. So I guess from that point of view, it is autonomous.
Well, it's funny too. The thing that occurs to me is that, and it was. I loved how you showed, Lev, that with the environment API, you can feed in any kind of a Dagger object, whether that object is a core type or whether that object is something more complex, like, you had a workspace that had a bunch of different functions, and all those functions become tools. So it made me wonder if, like, one of the functions that you could provide would be, the function that just generates the page, given the data. And then, then the LLM could just like, oh, I've got the data here in this directory. Let me just feed it to this function and get the result I want, versus trying to figure it out in vector space.
Yeah. I think that that's a good point, right? Like there's a reason why Hugo and others use this structure, right? Because the naive thing to do is just to generate HTML pages. You can go parse all of them and figure out this information.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm doing. So that's just wrong. It just feels wrong. Like I'm reinventing that wheel for no reason. I think at the very least, including this information in the HTML or in the markdown file or whatever, is probably the way to go. Because like that's the simplest way to do this without including a database or without writing endless loops.
Oh yeah, I think you can just generate markdown and render.
Yeah.
In the front.
Yeah, I did. I was actually doing that at the very beginning, but I ran into some issues creating the site because again, like in some ways, I'm like reinventing a static site generator. So I think truly the simple solution is just to go pick one and use it instead, and then add the reports into wherever that static site generator wants to see its markdown files, or things like that. I think that's probably the way to go, because not only will it fix the theme variation, I think it'll make doing all this kind of stuff so much easier in the future as well.
Yeah.
So fun to see the journey.
Yeah. And it will be really interesting to see, even just in the whole industry, of how, like right now, you're trying to reinvent the wheel because it's so easy to build and experiment quickly. But then, there are tooling that's already been there for a while, like you mentioned, and you could just go with that. And so it's going to be really interesting to see what people end up just building, because they can build it quickly, versus still going to tools that they know work and can be implemented and integrated into this. And it's also very cool to see Daggerverse functions being used that were built that weren't specific for a QA, for this QA agent one, or agents in general, and it was being used, in this. So it's just a good reminder to everyone who's getting started with agents to check out what's in the Daggerverse and being able to, having your agents pull from there, because there's probably a lot of functions or modules that are really useful for you in there already that you don't even have to build. So shameless plug to that.
One last thing I want to say is the entire repo is public, but this project is public in Dagger Cloud. So anybody can see these traces if they want to, which I think is really nice. And one little tip I will give people is one of the best features of like Dagger LLM mode, if you will, is this high noisy spans, because it kind of just gets down to business and only shows you this kind of back and forth information. But if you do want to investigate what's actually happening, unclicking this gives you a lot more details, and this is really helpful for debugging. So I've used this a ton as I was building this out to see like what is it actually doing at each step of the way, and I find that to be really, really helpful. So if you want to see that for yourself, you can check out this project, or you can of course hook up Dagger Cloud to your agent and go from there as well.